G'day everyone, my name's Stu Lill. I work at MurrayDarling Basin Authority, based out of Canberra, but obviously we work across the entire Murray-Darling Basin. I just want to talk about a few things that are happening in our space, but we're definitely got to zoom way out from the stuff that Braden's talking about, really site sort of specific stuff, and start talking about the basin as a whole. Just like to acknowledge that the First Nations of the Mildura Valley, the land we're on today, and anyone in the room who's of First Nations descent and their elders past and present. I want to thank Braden, Ozfish, for the chance to have a chat with you guys, talk about native fish and some of the stuff that we're doing, and also thank you guys for your interest in native fish, because it is something that a lot of people have really close to their heart, really passionate about, and I think that's fantastic, and I think we can do a lot of work together. So it's been 3 years since Menindee, the big fish kills at Menindee, just downstream of the main weir there. And a lot of people, yourselves included, probably reckon the government's not been doing much. And it's probably a bit in that space, but we're getting there. So I want to tell you about some of the stuff that has been happening, some of the stuff we've been investing in and all that sort of stuff. But first, I just want to get back to basics. So Murray-Darling Basin, 46 odd freshwater species, another 15 to 20 that sort of use the Murray mouth and estuary. And the native fish story for the basin is incredible. Some of the diversity, the way that these fish move, breed, and go about their life is fantastic. But also the strong connection that all basin communities have. You just go into any town, there's a Murray cod painted on a silo, it's on the town sign, all that sort of stuff. They're clearly a totem for First Nations people. They're a food source in some places where people are really struggling. They're a huge part of the community and a key part of the river ecosystem. But things aren't going fantastic for native fish, as I'm sure you're all aware. So this is a graph about numbers of fish and how many there are of small fish, medium fish, adult fish. And this is for the southern basin, so we've put a bunch of research together, and it's really hard to see, but this very bottom bit is the fish that are sort of deemed as young of year, or the ones that have bred that year. And as you can see, across all those years, it's really, really poor for golden perch. And a lot of that is stuff to do with how we've changed flows, how we've got weirs and dams and all that sort of stuff. And Ian will probably touch on a heap of this stuff, so I won't go into that detail. But even worse, the north, which is considered a real stronghold for golden perch, the numbers aren't jumping off the page either. We're not going, oh, it's fantastic in the north and just no good in the south. A lot of the catchments in the north are also struggling, and we've got the same sort of problems. We've got water being extracted, we've got weirs and dams and all this sort of stuff interrupting the flow. So we've clearly got a problem. That's just one species, let alone all the rest. And all those sort of findings all got culminated together with a bunch of experts, and they thought about it. They thought about how many fish we've got compared to when European settlement. And we reckon we're probably at 10%, if not worse, of pre-European conditions. So that's pretty bad. And obviously the fish kills in Menindee were a massive wake-up call. We've got a lot of problems in water management and water quality management, and we need to do things better. And we are doing things better, and we're starting to do things better, but we know we've got a long way to go. We're definitely managing our water better and our water quality better. Certainly not perfect. There's a lot of stuff we could do better, but we are improving things, and we're actually getting states to talk to each other, which has been a real problem in the past. You won't have Queenslanders talking to New South Wales, talking to Victorian, as far as the government agency is concerned. Even just getting people in the same room talking about what are the risks about water quality. Thank you. What are the risks about water quality for the coming season, for the coming summer? Where are you seeing the problems? Getting that sort of stuff and getting that information together is a big win. We're also getting better at managing the water and the environmental water that we've now got in hand, and Richard from the Tuos here, and he can talk a little bit about that. But we've got those states working together and working in partnership and trying to coordinate flows that things get so that rivers flow like they used to. In the meantime, we're also investing in a whole bunch of other things in addition to water management. And these are the things that we call complementary measures. So they're things that work in harmony with the water and the environmental water that we're putting through the system. And these are things like the stuff that you guys do, the stuff that Ian's mob and others do, putting habitat in, fencing off riverbanks so that stock don't erode the banks, screening off pumps, which is going to be a huge thing that we really need to push further forward on, putting snags in the river, all that sort of stuff. The other thing that came out after the Menindee fish kills was a native fish recovery strategy. So we used to have a native fish strategy back in the early 2000s. It got defunded and it got reborn, I suppose, following Menindee fish kills. And there's been a bit of investment in the past couple of years, about $3 million in 4 locations in the basin, including the Lower Darling at Barker and also the Mid-Murray floodplains, which Peter Rose was going to talk about, but he's unwell. Trying to do on-ground actions that recover fish, like habitat programs and breeding programs and that type of stuff. We've also got some locations way up in the headwater country. And the strategy also identifies a whole bunch of areas that we should be investing in over the long term. And those are things like fishways, fish screens, all that sort of stuff. And so, for example, there's a bit of alignment there with what was called the Northern Basin Toolkit. So they changed some water management decisions and said, we're going to invest $180 million in a bunch of things up in the Northern Basin catchments. And that includes things like, again, fishways on a lot of these weirs to allow fish to move between different areas and allow them to complete their breeding cycles and so forth. Again, fencing riverbanks, pump screening, and even just coordinating flow again between the states and between the catchments so fish can do what they're supposed to do instead of being stuck in the channel, stuck in a water hole where they shouldn't be. And there's some other sort of smaller investments too. We're talking about a whole bunch of research around water, and there's particularly we're focusing on what happens with fish in low flow conditions, which were obviously a real problem in the past few years until we started getting some rain. We're doing more about monitoring and looking at more fish and what they're doing. But we're also, the Commonwealth is actually chipping in some money for on-ground actions on on-ground programs where we're trying to restore habitat in individual wetlands and individual rivers. And Ozfish have been able to get their hands on some of those funds, but there's also other groups out there doing this sort of stuff. So you can see there's a fair bit of money getting thrown around at the moment. And why? Because as Braden says, we know it works. When we do habitat restoration and we combine it with better flows, it just works. So this graph, in a real nutshell, you've got 3 lines, and the only line that's actually doing anything is where we've put habitat, where we've put snags, where we've got rid of carp, and where we've got environmental flows. And that's the kind of response you can get when you do things together and not just think about water and not just think about flows. So where does stuff like water for the environment fit into this? We just can't expect fish to recover just from doing habitat or just from dealing with water. You have to have both. So this is what we're doing, but we're still pushing for better flows for fish, better water policy, better water sharing between irrigators and the environment, keeping flows, trying to get flows back to a pattern that's a bit more natural, getting them out of the channel where we can, getting them back into the proper seasons when they happened, but also do the habitat recovery and that type of thing. And the rec fishing community, you guys here, can really make a huge difference to this, not just in doing the habitat work, but getting involved if there becomes citizen sort of monitoring programs you can get involved in, getting involved in sort of on-ground actions and bringing native fish back, even if it's the little fish like at the ornamental lakes here. but also being really visible in your community and telling people about how passionate you are about native fish, how important they are to you, and getting in the ear of those people with the purse strings and who can make government promises, and getting stuck into them and telling them that you want them to invest in not just environmental water, but also habitat actions, not just one or the other. Thanks very much.